to the Loud Sound Epicenter podcast. Today we have a structured show, which is very rare. We're getting back into the swing of things. Today we're also going to be, look at all these sources that are taking up the desk. So, bit of a hodgepodge this show, but there is something happening at 8 p.m. Central Time that I think you guys should check out. I'll mention that at the end, but today's show, there is quite an amount to get to. So, I see some regulars in chat. Vingel and Ryan, thank you. So, as the title appropriately suggests, we're going to be talking about the generations and their effect on pop culture, more specifically music. Now, the music that I'm going to be discussing is heavy metal and sort of the confusion around that term. It is a question of identity. And one aspect that is unignorable is that generations play a role in that. The boomers created metal, but there is some weirdness after that, which we'll be getting into soon here. And the fact that they basically gave the responsibility to Gen X to inherit the genre. This was very, very unfortunate that this happened. So, specifically Gen X, by far one of the reasons why so much of music in general is called into question. This is a show that kind of should be shared. I gotta bring some gotta reach out to some people to talk about this stuff too. All right. Little distracted, as you can see, a little distracted. So where do we start? I got some notes, and here I'll be saying some other things. Well, okay. Let's start with the basics, okay? If we have a linear view of history, it really reduces culture to something one-dimensional, and you can't have that, especially when talking about music. Everything gets, like we were talking about how decades don't really start January 1st of said decade to December 31st of said year, not decade. The culture calendar, I think, is a lot more relevant when we're looking at these kind of things. And a relevant outline that I think could help is the Hegelian model or the Spenglerian model, to understand that people and genres are separate things. I want to mention that concept. And then Chuck Klosterman. I was just watching some of his content right before. And so that's going to be a main citation. I want to give credit to Pohl for reminding me to use that. I won't be mentioning his heavy metal book, mostly the outline of Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. I said Captain Crunch on Twitter. I thought that was funny, and the way that he talks about the 90s. So in the first collection of essays, he's talking about what the 90s means to him, and so maybe I'm projecting a little bit here. And I think that approach, that gonzo journalist style, I think is oftentimes more authentic than some of the scholarly accounts, this quote unquote historian perspective. And the other book, the 90s, was him stepping outside of the scholarly perspective and introducing a more probably not on purpose, but it is kind of more Hegelian, looking conceptually at history rather than a starting point and a finishing point. So one of the examples that he gives is jazz, for example, was a genre that had a lot of cachet for young people, and jazz still exists today, but it doesn't exist in the same way. A lot of its identity has had its parts stripped away. And it's funny because Prudentialist is talking about La La Land for the film festival. That's a very relevant example because And that movie talks about sort of the bygone era of jazz being replaced by this more commercial sentiment. And metal definitely went in that same direction. So, also, before I forget, maybe I can mention this later on, but what did metal fans inherit from jazz? Because that's the other thing we're going to be talking about with identity. Is a lot of it is a hodgepodge. There's a lot of melting pot stuff. Unfortunately, metal seems to inherit its worst aspects, and those become amplified in the media. So, for example, with jazz, the drug abuse and the fanatic behavior. Of course, metal inherited that part, the polarizing parts, and yet all of the classical influences, a lot of the technical musicianship, a lot of that stuff. It's like that's for the people who are in the know, the stuff that is probably the most valuable. And so it seems like the aesthetic takes up too much space in the way people think about metal. And it seems like the fans don't understand that these two things are separate. So, anyways, let's get into it. Let's get into it. A 6-minute intro. I'm thinking we're back. So, heavy metal. What is the first impression you ask someone on the street? What is heavy metal? And I think you can reduce the public perception into three categories: loud, dark, and the most concerning one is the anti Christian label. So, where do we go? So, that last one, I'll say right now, for right now, at the time of me making this video, I'll say that that's up for debate. I'd like to bring the generations back into this as the main thing here, because the people that created metal, boomers, they are also the ones that created metal are also outliers within their own generation. As Paul reminded me, they were listening to feel good music. Not that metal can't make you feel that way, but they're listening to a lot of this upbeat commercial sounding stuff. And so it's even more confusing when you try to narrow down metal into into this unilateral category. But it was the boomers who made metal, so there's your starting point. And people don't even agree on what exactly that is. What is that genre? The early phase of it. In 1969, you got the Zeppelin sound, and then of course Jimmy Page came from the Yardbirds. The Yardbirds had their fuzzy psychedelic rock, and so like what it sounds bluesy, and the blues genre doesn't seem to have that negative reputation, and metal fans today seem to welcome that bad reputation. And I think that's a mistake. To start with our first citation. Well, hold on a second, because I think people may not understand what is the role of metal in sort of this American and British counterculture. So Tony Iommi, who was in Ozzy's band, he was talking about, where is it? He was in a car crash, and he's talking about how he's implying that he's been saved here, saved for a purpose to do something. And I think that really sets the stage. So he had this experience, and hold on. There's another thing in here. I'm trying to. Yeah, here we are. Here we are. So you got these musicians, and I want to mention this at the end of this whole spiel. But metal really is derivative of the blues. And oh, perfect. There we go. Before I forget, remember what we're talking about when we're talking about music. We're talking. Okay. Thank you, Manon. Threw me off there for a second there. But people don't seem to understand the cyclical nature of music. That you kind of have these peaks, and even if the genre changes, this should cause some introspection to look back and what is the real definition of this music, and are the labels that people talk about accurate? So, for example, okay, people talk about the edgy rock and roll, a lot of people, if you were to look at the linear perspective on music, you would, of course, can we get enough? Can we get enough citations about the Beatles already? And what else? We got, like, for example, I think where did that even go? Where did that CD? Oh, is it right here? Like, even bands go through different eras, and those eras can shine light on some of, or rather, to kind of make sense of some of the, like, the evolution of a lot of these genres. Like, for example, the Rolling Stones never sounded just like this. You got all kinds of stuff in the latter half of the 70s, like all kinds, for example. Just for example. But metal seems to have this relationship with the blues, and yet the blues doesn't have any baggage that in the as far as the mainstream is concerned. So I want to talk about Tony Iommi talking about the early stage before he met Ozzy. Or let me see. I think this is around the time he first met Ozzy. So we dropped the name the Polka Tulk Blues Band and changed it to Earth Blues Band. We were doing 12-bar blues, 10 years after type stuff. I just liked anything with guitar. We had blues albums by artists I'd never heard of it. I've never heard of, but there would be a guitar solo, and one of them he would try to he would notice the 12 bar. And so you have this relationship with the blues. You see the hodgepodge. You can even throw in some of the psychedelic rock of the 60s. Maybe people can remind me sort of the British. There was the British invasion, which spread to America, but you also had this scene, and people probably aren't even aware of that started in Britain. And so that just goes to show you, like, the fact that this stuff from its inception is already on a dark path. Well, we're connecting it with the blues, and there's already there's some nuance there. So let me see. Let me see what we got. I got some bookmarks here, which by the way, for the channel, this was before the YouTube channel. Anyways. I think most of these are anecdotes, so I think we'll be saving that for. Okay, that's an anecdote. Oh, that's what I was going to say. We're all aware of the British invasion scene. It's the mods and rockers. That's the thing that is a little bit different. So excuse me, I misspoke there. But I want to emphasize this scene that's developing, okay? And as of right now, it's a positive trajectory. More on that in a minute here. So when I was talking about that early sound, you've got Zeppelin, you've got Deep Purple. You could say it's like a monolith so far, but it is contingent on the blues. So I would I would ask if you would have that same animosity towards a genre that even a boomer could be sympathetic with, because it seems like, well, we'll get to Gen X in a sec. We're all over the place here. All right. An anecdote. And also, with a band like Sabbath, they eventually get to a point where they introduce a mainstream sound to their albums. Like Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die are examples of albums that are radio friendly, and the idea that it doesn't have to be polarizing the way that Gen X have exacerbated it, the way that boomers neglected to define. So okay. So let me save that for a later section. And let's get back to the generations. I want to stay on topic here. So what do we got here? We got the British invasion. We have these, countercultural hippies. What is all this? What's a word for all this stuff? It's boomer. Okay, that's what's happening here. The boomers they had something. Hey, tell me something. Yeah, tell me about this. Okay, They had family values, order, discipline, and they also had metal. Yet, like all those things I listed, they neglected it and let the media kind of define their culture, which is ironic. You would think them kind of having this firsthand experience, you would be able to get an authentic testimony, but it seems like there's all this speculation for something that they pivot to the scholars to make sense of, ironically. So, uh, we got that. So we got that. So what else? What else? Are we done with the boomers? I don't think we are. One of the limiting aspects of the boomers is that the linear view of history seems to be something that they insist everyone else should do. And the fact that they couldn't explain what they were beyond, this emotivist perspective. When people call them weird, when people call them anti-Christian, they embraced that narrative and allowed it to define the genre. To go back to those three labels I mentioned earlier, heavy metal is a sound. It's a sound. Does that mean ideology is attached to it? I throw that question to you guys. The fact that different people can mimic that sound, does it cease to be metal depending on who plays it? Someone said in a comment section, metal is angry blues, as I kind of rambled on earlier. Ramble on. So is emotion part of the definition of metal? Does the motivation of that emotion, is that also part of the definition? It seems like boomers weren't really ready for these types of questions, and when people ask what is metal, they allow it to be this umbrella term. So, now that I've said all that about the boomers, that went on for a little too bit. Too bit. We'll try and clean it up. Let's move on to our another favorite group. Let's move on to some people that you're probably more familiar with. The boomers feels like a bygone era. Let's talk to some people that we're probably a bit more intimate with. Gen X. All right. Because they inherited metal, the generation right after. And so what do they got? They allow the genre. Well, first, let me say this. Let me. What Gen X did for metal was they're kind of doing what Zoomers do with metal today. Gen X was kind of checking out obscure bands like the new wave of British heavy metal, and they were kind of looking at this melting pot of the '60s stuff, the '70s, and trying to create a trajectory of where this thing's going to move forward. So technically, they made thrash, they made speed metal. So they're kind of working on this from this engineer's perspective, kind of seeing the pros and the cons of the past. However, as our favorite people in Gen X, as they do, they allowed the legacy of metal to get watered down. So much so that the best example, Metallica, goes from doing a thrash album to something like Load. And because they have this credibility of paving this way for metal in the '80s, people throw their hands up and say, well, a lot of people agreed to this definition of metal. And because Metallica are the gatekeepers of this genre, it allows it to become this big tent movement. And remember, Metallica is not just preserving, well, they're not just neglecting their name as a band. They're also, the genre is in their name. It's metal in Metallica. So do you understand how this creates an identity crisis? It causes more confusion that didn't have to exist. You already had some confusion with the boomers neglecting to have a definition. And then the Gen X seems to follow in that same mistake. So boomers were irresponsible, not surprising. And then Gen X also not exactly our friends. However, with decentralized media, the internet is a resource to remind people that there is a way to narrow down the identity of a genre, clarify that past generations can't be relied on, for example, for explaining things. Gen Z has a valuable opportunity to set the record straight. And it's a lot like, well, it wasn't him, but Somebody said it's a lot like how the internet was was made by people who didn't know its capacity, and compare that to how young people today are more tech savvy than their predecessors. That's a similar thing that's going on with metal, and it's a complicated thing. Like Metallica, they created something that didn't exist before, so they get some credit, but then they peak and they make the same mistakes as the boomers, refusing to define what the legacy is in concrete terms. So I wanna give some credit to where the boomers were, because this is kind of this may even be the most amount of credit you can give to the boomers, because they had this valuable opportunity. Maybe maybe what they do with it is their shortcoming. But I want this to be an anecdote similar to the Tony Iommi one I did earlier. Here we go. Here we go. This is about KK Downing, guitarist, seeing Jimi Hendrix play, and you may have seen him multiple times. So again, a bygone era, one bygone era, citing another bygone era. But again, at this point, KK Downing's a young guy, and so his trajectory is just getting started. Whereas uh, Jimi Hendrix his is sort of fizzling out. Here we go. More significantly, seeing Hendrix in a few different situations over a couple of years made me realize again that he could turn it on or turn it off whenever he felt like it. And all of this accelerated the idea that maybe, just maybe, little old me could do the same thing someday. Of course, the conditioned part of me thought, dream on, Ken, but another bigger part of me thought, come on, mate, let's have a go anyway. At this point, me actually becoming a rock musician seemed as far fetched as winning the lottery nowadays. Nevertheless, I just kept on practicing and I got better. This is the peak of the boomer capacity. The beyond their limitations, this is what they get right. They have a dream, they create this genre, but they don't know exactly who to lend it to, how to preserve it, define what exactly it is. It's like they're these stumbling drunks in a way, stumbling Brits. And I don't know. It's a complicated thing, just like Metallica. They created a new style of metal and killed it at the same time. It's very strange. I also want to point out, uh, I want to thank Greg Renoff. Greg Renoff did this historian account of the early days of Van Halen. You can find him on Twitter. He's active for actually I don't know which generation he is, but anyways, he he really kind of got this channel up and running, to tell you the truth, before it was a channel. And so stuff like this, uh, Chuck Klosterman, who might be a theme on the show here. I've cited Lester Bangs. I think we're going to retire that just because he's cringe. But to kind of bring it back to this Hegelian perspective of history, we want to take the concept. Like, for example, we like the Beatles, but we recognize the limitations. By that same logic, where's my Pink Floyd album? Anyways, it's like, imagine The Wall, but not cringe. Imagine like Pink Floyd Imagination, but they're not making songs for partisan reasons about, you know, other countries. It's like, you can see where the peak is and where the potential lies. And so I want to end off with something that Greg wrote talking about Van Halen. Again, another, if we could focus on the cyclical nature of these bands, just like KK Downing, young guy, his trajectory is just getting started. Van Halen, by that same merit, is also just starting in October 1976. For those that don't know, Gene Simmons from Kiss kind of discovered Van Halen when they were in their early phase, and he was trying to show the record companies that this is the new thing, this is the new trajectory for metal. And so that's why the title of this book is How a Southern California Backyard Party Band Saved Heavy Metal. So they're in this backyard party. Well, I think by this point they're doing the Sunset Strip, so it's a little bit different. They've graduated from like a local tribute band, and they're sort of mounting up. But anyways, so Gene Simmons is trying to promote them to the record labels, and the record labels are kind of stuck in this boomer-esque mindset. You have a band like Boston, which is like up tempo, kind of like Van Halen, and Quiet Riot is also this kind of like happy metal. But the trend hadn't been set yet. We were still in this progressive rock, punk rock was starting to escalate, and so you didn't have this transition that went into the 80s. But anyways, Kiss bassist Gene Simmons wanted more. To be sure, he had already enjoyed more power, fame, money, women than whole cities of normal men enjoyed in a lifetime. Kiss was now America's biggest rock band. Over the summer, they performed in front of sellout crowds across the country, capped off by an explosive performance in front of 43,000 fans at Anaheim Stadium. Their new single, Beth, had just cracked the Billboard Top 20. Their latest album, okay, okay. But sitting in his Hollywood hotel room, he gave Kiss's achievements little thought. Instead, he focused on his newest ambition to manage and produce a young rock band. So even though it's complicated because Gene Simmons not really a young guy, younger, and Kiss is already this established act. So this is kind of ideally what we want. This is sort of the what we would like the teal network to kind of do for NRX or the online right. We would kind of want these older people to be in sync, be on the same wavelength as some of us young up and comers. And so that's what Gene Simmons is trying to do for Van Halen. Kind of like if we could draw an analogy with KK Downing's testimony, the idea that the younger generation recognizes the strengths and weaknesses of theirs, and they use not in an exploitive way, but in like send understand what the legacy is, unlike what a lot of boomers and Gen X do with metal. We want a Gene Simmons type to kind of usher in that younger generation so that it can be what Metallica was. It would have been more fitting if, because it's kind of in a similar area, it would have been fitting if Kiss discovered Metallica and said, these guys have something going on. They understand some of the more obscure stuff and they have a good trajectory. We don't have to be in this. Like Robert Fripp talked about how progressive rock reached its peak in like the mid to late 70s. And so the genre is dead. You don't have to, there's nothing left to build upon it. So if you could have had that type of, sympathy towards the right band. And a lot of people don't see it. Eddie Trunk infamously said that when he first heard Metallica, when they first got going, he didn't know what to make of it because that trend hadn't been set yet. And same thing with Van Halen. This Sunset Strip sound hadn't exploded. Glam metal, hair metal wasn't the thing quite yet. And so it would be nice. It would be nice if we could have if we could have an alliance between young people and older people who are in the know to kind of sort of a synthesis, really, to understand that this linear view of history and more so the perspectives on music, where the definitions lie. It would be nice to kind of clear some of that up. And I think it takes somebody like Lester Bangs, minus the cringe. It takes like a gonzo journalist, a Chuck Klosterman, to make sense of that stuff. And because as I said, we're in decentralized media, digital age. You know, now's the opportunity to kind of make sense of a lot of the stuff. And you could apply this to politics. You could apply this to sociology, etc. People like Catherine D, I think, are on the right footing with that kind of stuff. We want to Vingle. That's not what I meant. That is not what I meant. That is not what I meant. I'm saying because Gene Simmons is older than Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth at that time. That's what I meant by that. Please, please. Um, where was I? So yeah, but it's nothing you haven't heard. Boomers, and Gen X making the world more cringe. What else is new? What else is new? And by the way, if you don't believe me, it's kind of strange to hear people say one of the things that defines metal is the fact that it's loud. Doesn't everybody listen to their music loud? Is that just me projecting? Like the music is loud. Turn it down. Turn it. I don't know. Is a volume? You understand what I'm saying? Like you have to understand where identity. People take advantage of the definition. They don't know what it means. It becomes a big open tent. But, like, the volume, I don't think that's ever been a criteria for music. Now dark, that could have a personality to it. I don't know if that's inherently negative, if something is dark. I'll have to consult Tyler Hamilton. But, like a horror movie, is that sinful, like, depicting dark things? Is there anything wrong with that? But the thing that we can minimize is like the anti-Christian thing. Somebody said, I forget who, but it's like the evil imagery. That's very 80s. Okay, and bands that are still doing that, and bands still do. It's part of that limited psychological perspective. And people, it's kind of like a Cold War mentality, like literally the 80s mentality. People don't know how to graduate. It's like that's not cool. All that stuff that upset parents. That would be like that would be like being like the beat generation today. It just doesn't fit in this 21st century. So that's the thing. In a way, metal is kind of has a lot of the same criteria as every other genre, like jazz. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the metal fans kind of do their own undoing. They because I was trying to put together a list of bands to recommend to people that aren't polarizing, but that are heavy. And you got to avoid these bands that just exploit the not even exploit, but I mean just the surface of using the evil imagery. It seems like a very dated thing. It's and it's also I where is it? Where is it? It's very like it should be just as dated as like the Universal monster movies. We recognize that this stuff probably wouldn't scare people today, but yet the metal bands don't seem to take that advice when they're talking about music. So it's again trying to find the weaknesses and trying to avoid making the mistakes because it seems like mistakes are passed down through generations. Anyways, that was a little too loose. I was trying to do a structure there, but anyways, maybe this will be a nice a nice test run. So yeah, boomer. But you see, I was telling Paul on Twitter, there is potential if we could have older people on our side. There could be an alliance between that older generation that experienced the good times, the wholesome times, and the Zoomers who are well read and more introspective than Gen X. It's like Gen X is like hated by everybody. Well, not everybody, but Gen X is kind of in this awkward position where they don't have they don't have the credit that the boomers created, and they don't have the introspection that the Zoomers are capitalizing on. And so maybe Gen X is the model for what not to be. But anyways, I wanted to here. Let me catch up with chat, and then I feel like after I gave like a class presentation, it's like that was okay. And this will definitely probably inspire something I'll send somewhere. So thank you guys. Thank you guys. Vingle, thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah. See, that's here. Vingle. The boomers did make better music. The problem is because they made it a big tent movement. Now people can't make that type of music because most people are working within this framework where they don't know how to make that music. They don't know what the music is. So you understand that identity crisis allows Gen X to say that all these things that that don't qualify as metal could be counted as metal just because we can't agree on a definition. For example, this kind of came to a head with or this kind of got a breaking point with new metal. Some would say like the way people in the 70s would say you can't use or in the 80s you can't use keyboards and metal, that's too upbeat. Well, what about these new metal bands that have, you know, rap and what is it? Disc scratching and all this stuff. The stuff that just I like it's not that it isn't metal because it's not heavy, it's just we're talking about two different genres, and so that category distinction is relevant when we're trying to figure out what is metal. And so when metal gets so watered down and loses its identity, it allows generations like us to go back to the root and narrow down, well, okay, we definitely agree that some of these newer bands aren't metal, like the stuff that like your sisters probably listened to in the early 2000s and said that this is heavy. But see, it may be heavy, but it's not metal. You understand what I'm saying? Maybe that's another underreported distinction. But anyways, having all this nuance kind of just thrown out there in this hodgepodge stream can kind of get people thinking. Help me to understand this stuff too. Yes, exactly. And this is yeah. It also there's no incentive to create a scene. That's why something like in our political spheres, it's kind of it feels like this new thing, even though things like this used to happen in the real world setting, like a CBGB's type deal, Sunset Strip. A lot of those organic cultures get neglected in the digital age. But if something like if it could become a trend in the political circles, imagine what is possible with music. It's tough though because you got Spotify. You know, how are bands going to be able to compete when when there's no incentive to reach a lot of mainstream people? That's why you need a Gene Simmons type in the industry who's sympathetic and knows the score. So that's the thing. I don't know who's talking about Selena Gomez, Manone. That kind of sounds like projection on your part. But no, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, okay, let's talk about this. Is Sabbath metal? Think about if you're in 1969, you're a hippie. Maybe maybe don't imagine that. You just so happen to be at the venue and the new Yardbirds, which they used to call it. It was Robert Plant, John Bonham. It might have been the whole lineup, but you got all these people. They're playing heavy blues, as I said, angry blues. I mean, if you hear Communication Breakdown in the late '60s, what else do you call that but metal? And I don't know. See, I don't to me, like, the fact that it has a relationship to metal, I don't know if that's good enough because you could say, "Oh, okay, well, Chuck Berry has a relationship to metal." You know, where do you draw this arbitrary line? It seems a little too vague. But I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that Zeppelin is metal. I don't know. I don't know. The fact that we there you go, Vingo. The fact that we can't place it, I think that's cause for concern. Yo, Black Sox Jack. Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to be lazy today. I wanted to Hey, Paul, thank you. Thank you for this. Yeah, yeah. We Gen Xers never had power to do anything. The boomers had all the control and gave it all over to the millennials without giving us anything. So maybe that's why there's this awkward generation between, boomers, Gen X, millennials. that is relevant. And it's funny, like, the band Queen, I know they're kinda cringe, but the fact that they have that song on Stone Cold Crazy or, no, it's Sheer Heart Attack, Stone Cold Crazy's the song. There's a band that's messing around with, like, opera and what would go on to be, like, a thrash metal sound, but they didn't exploit it. The fact that you had this era of musicians that, for were really interested in innovation, whereas, a lot of the thrash bands, they they use a lot of they take advantage of the legacy, and they wrap themselves in a lot of the evil imagery that is very cringe and not cool, so. Oh, really? I didn't know that bell curve. Yo, thank you, Brotherhood of Nod, thank you. I'm wearing my, Michael Townley, Michael DeSanta, jacket. I was talking about Wonderland, the 2003 Val Kilmer movie, which I recommend you guys check that out. Real crime drama done in an appropriate way, not just a ripoff of Tarantino. That's my pitch. And I think there's a scene where he's wearing a similar jacket. So I was trying to think of how many other people have worn a similar style. Vingle, I haven't read that book. It's a little bit into how capitalism has destroyed subcultures, grunge being the most obvious example. Uh, well, to cite Klosterman again, he was talking about how the grunge bands were confronting the the grunge bands were confronting what was the linear view on fame in the music industry. So the fact that you had bands that were disillusioned with it, it's it's difficult because a lot of obviously the grunge bands weren't thinking in this Hegelian, Spenglerian perspective, but they were smart enough to know that selling out doesn't mean not wanting to be successful. It means wanting to be liked by people that you don't have anything in common with. So there's that distinction. Some people might be surprised why, is there anything wrong with Bon Jovi, the fact that he's popular, or is that just democracy in action? You know what I'm saying? So the fact that grunge was kind of running away from fame, that could also be a relevant idea here. But it's difficult because grunge isn't really reactionary because a lot of the people in these bands, they're just the hippies. They're the hippies. They're the Gen Xers that grew up and were just as cringe as the hippies. That's the ironic thing. So, but thank you, Vingol. Thank you for yeah, John Doyle's favorite band is Blink-182. So I don't know, man. Is he gonna make it? Is he gonna make it? Yeah, thank you, Bell Curve. Yeah, I'm confronted with my two identities, the duality of man. My the Zoomer side of me wants to defend Blink 182, Atreyu, Papa Roach, but 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 a lot of that stuff is responsible for the destruction of metal. So I was listening to Evanescence on the way home yesterday, and look, man, it's not that bad, okay? Like, it's a difficult thing. Like, I think for nostalgic purposes, we can give them some leeway, but it's I don't know. People aren't really making that kind of indie rock anymore either. So I think even they could recognize that indie rock, even if you defend some of that early stuff, you would never say that whatever they're up to now can compete with the classic material. You understand what I'm saying? The Zoomer versus trying to fix the metal's legacy. Which way, Western man? You know, me having a script ironically makes this very linear. When I go off the script, I am more true to the conceptual side of what I'm trying to explain. Scripting this stream is very counterintuitive to the point I'm trying to explain. Yeah, Queen, you got to be careful with Queen. See, I don't think so, Vingel. Do you really need the imagery? Can't you just play? Like, does it matter what a surf rocker wears when he's playing that when he's doing the what sounds like, thrash metal riffs? See, in what genre outside of the metal subgenres, like glam metal gets attached to the look, but it's glam metal is a sound first, and then whatever happens after that is probably up for debate. You know what I'm saying? Why don't we apply that standard to any other music genre? This is boomer neglect, this is Gen X conditioning. Well, Paul, I'm saying for Nirvana, I'm saying the a lot of the critique that they had against the commercial aspect. I know that they posed on the cover of magazines. I know that that's not exactly running from fame. The fact that critique existed at all, that's what I'm saying. You didn't really have bands before the '90s talking about well, I mean, you did, but you understand that as far as the mainstream is concerned, that stuff's started to become relevant to a wider audience. No, no, Manone, it's not. It's not. I tried to make it so. Yeah, there's probably hey, that's interesting. The shock jock mimicking Howard Stern. Yeah, that could be. I may have a similar idea. Bell curve. I gotta read up on some stuff though first. So all right. Okay. Now that okay, for those of you, we're gonna do some anecdotes now. Before we do that, I want to remind everyone about the Discord. Anyone who's interested, I have some anecdotes here. Now the show can really start. This is Tony Iommi writing this. What do we got? So the other thing too, this is kind of an interesting aspect. The fact that musicians were starving, I think created a positive incentive on the music because it's not just like a survival for the genre. It's like It's like you have to be good to compete with all the others band. It's like a real free market, dare I use that term. So, maybe that's one of the missing links with the industry today. Um, Tony Iommi is talking about it was like slavery with us playing 5 45-minute spots and 7 on the weekends with hardly any pay, but we did have a lot of laughs, and Bill, the drummer, smoked smoked banana skins. He used to eat banana, scrape all the residue off the skin, put it on a piece of tinfoil, and smoke it. Uh, so I don't know if that's not an endorsement by any means, but I did not expect to read that when I opened this up. I mentioned the mods and rockers. Okay, we mentioned this. You really do need see, here's the other thing, I forgot to mention this. We really have to acknowledge the strengths of Sharon Osbourne. I know Sharon Osbourne has a bad reputation. A lot of that, I think, is conditioning too, because think about what Sharon Osbourne did. Give credit where it's due. Sharon Osbourne took Ozzy, who was probably going to die after he left the band, and instead of letting him die, she took advantage of his strengths and made him a solo artist. He did not become obscure like somebody like Tony Martin, who sang in Ozzy's band but doesn't have the same mainstream success. So you see that like Sharon Osbourne, all the things you could say about her, that is like the Gene Simmons archetype that we mentioned earlier. She recognized where the strength in Ozzy was, and she saw a trajectory that did not exist outside of the band that he used to be in. I know that might sound contrarian, there's all kinds of things you could say about her. But I mean, if we could have a type like that. So you gotta acknowledge, you gotta acknowledge. And think about that. Think about like the potential for corruption, the fact that she's so protective that even somebody like Zach Wild, who just because Zach Wild had a separate band at the time, she saw that as competing against Ozzy's fame. There's something to be said about it. I don't know if it always has to lead. Does it always have to become overly protective? Uh, I don't know. It's interesting. Okay. I think you guys are going to want to hear this. So Bill, I mentioned earlier, is the drummer. One night in the studio, we dressed Bill up as Hitler. He had a few drinks, so it was easy. We got some gaffer tape, really strong tape that sticks to most things, and we put on his head, making his hairstyle like Hitler's. We made him a skinny mustache as well. We gave him this uniform and whatnot, and he was enjoying it all until we tried to take this stuff off him. We couldn't get it off his head because pulling the tape would mean ripping his hair out. So we basically cut all his hair off. By this time, he was well. What's this word? Show shed. I'll look that up. And he didn't even realize what we'd done until the next day. He wasn't very pleased. He looked even scruffier than he usually did. And then they talk about Billy Gibb from the Bee Gees to give you a sense of contrast. So, what else? Any other bangers? Oh, so yeah. The albums that people might be interested in, the latter half of the band, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. Some might say that is too commercial, but that's what most people listen to anyways. So does it really matter? I mean, by heavy metal's conceptual standard, it sounds different. But I would encourage people to check that stuff out and you guys be the judge. Slow Is that hold on. Yeah, 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 sorry. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, what does that mean? Is that sloshed? I don't is that how you spell that, though? Oh, sloshed. That is sloshed, okay. Reading it, that looked a little weird. I in my head, maybe this is the Zoomer limitations. I thought I guess that's how I would spell it. Okay, never mind. That was just me. Excuse me. And I think there is something to be said about the younger perspective because the Van Halen's 1978 tour where they were destroying Ozzy off the stage. Grace Slick once said that metal and probably hard rock overall, it's a genre made for young people. So when you see all these older bands doing multiple reunion tours, you know, they're like in their 50s and 60s playing this stuff. That was never the intention, according to her, for this type of music. And so, by that same logic, it would also take a younger perspective to probably be ahead of the curve as far as introspection and being able to define what the legacy is. I know that it must be the most obnoxious thing in the world for somebody like me who doesn't, you know, wasn't at Woodstock, wasn't there during the prime years, and for me to be the quote unquote expert. But I think the boomer, I was telling this to somebody after class, the the boomer truth regime, as AA calls it, it really does back people into corners, and they miss the forest for the trees. So I don't think it's just me wanting to be the new gatekeeper. I think that there is some merit to having a perspective that isn't with all these, you know, this 60s counterculture hippie baggage. So anyways. Oh, thank you for reminding me, Vingle, for saving the stream. My goodness, my goodness. Yes, okay. Check this out. So there's Fairies Wear Boots. Yeah, that song, if you look at the lyrics, you would think it's about because at the end of the song, Ozzy says his doctor tells him that smoking and tripping is all that you do. So it's implied that when Ozzy sees fairies wearing boots, literally, or actually not literally, but the perception of seeing them is due to him hallucinating. But actually, what that song is actually about is skinheads. Loads of skinheads trying to get me. They're all waiting for us to come out. We went out to see what was happening, and it was serious stuff. Ozzy grabbed a hammer, and I said, "Who is the one that got you then, geezer?" And so they're fighting these skinheads, and they're saying fairies, like they're calling the skinheads fairies, and because they wear Doc Martens, the song is called "Fairies Wear Boots." It's I mean, drugs is probably a part of it, especially towards the end. But that description, do you see how you could go your whole life and not catch that side of the song? Anyways, I wonder how much of that is, I don't know how much of that is public knowledge. And speaking of, look at "Fairies Wear Boots." What a lyric. But nobody questioned it. People accepted it because people don't have that introspection. Anyways. Now, I see this. You know, the boomers, it's like you almost can't really blame them because it's like they didn't understand how they didn't know how much value they had. With Gen X, it's a little more frustrating because you would want them to know better. And so, somebody so oh, so I see the Gen X maybe the boomers aren't doing the betrayal, but Gen X definitely is for kind of escalating it. And so in that same way, Def Leppard is a band where their first 2 albums are metal. You could probably argue the 3rd one a little bit. I'll leave that to you guys. But by the time you get to Hysteria, it's like that is a clear betrayal. That's just like that's Metallica with, changing their sound. And I remember somebody said, "Well, how can you get mad at Metallica for doing blues rock on Load and Reload?" I think mostly Load. How can you get mad at them for being too commercial? Blues rock is not commercial in the '90s. So, it's sort of the opposite of chasing trends because blues rock, that wasn't the thing. But it's the fact that you ran away from the metal label that's in your name, Metallica. I think that's the real gripe. So thank you, Manon, for reminding me about that. The betrayal aspect probably needs to be emphasized. And I gotta credit my dad for saying this, but could you imagine going up to a '80s metal fan and let's say a thrash fan, although they might have some rivalry against bands that they probably shouldn't. How about just hypothetically, you got a guy who likes glam metal, he likes thrash, he doesn't see the necessity for infighting and rivalries. But let's say you got a guy like that in the '80s, and you told him the bands that were gonna survive the long term on the radio is Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, just a handful of these commercial acts. Would you be surprised? Would you see? And it's like Bon Jovi did country, and it seems like people don't see that as a betrayal. Def Leppard went from metal to soccer mom type music, and they get a pass. It's just weird. All these bands that also betray, they they somehow get past the goalie. Whereas other bands change their sound to bring up Billy Squire. Thank you, Manon. And yes, we are Billy Squire respecters. Billy Squire did that music video that looked it was him dancing weirdly, and that ruined his career. And it's like bands have done worse things. Why are you gonna why does Billy Squire have to be destroyed? Wow. Bon Jovi still gets well, I mean, Billy Squire gets commercial radio play too. It's just a weird thing. It's weird how people just ignore certain things. You thought Madonna would be gone by '85? That's interesting. I don't know, like, what let's do that. Madonna's discography. Oh, I'm looking at whoops, whoops. That's movies. So 83. So by that point, you got two albums? Alright. Sorry if I don't have that memorized. Every Madonna song I heard has a cover first. Well, how many people are covering? I can't imagine. Yeah, that's true. That's true, Richard Crook. The commercial appeal has more to do with bringing people who don't really fit in the genre in most cases. So Yeah, yeah, Danny, yeah, what's going on, man? There's all these Madonna cover bands. Yeah, I don't know anybody that I can think of. Interesting. Manon, her second album, Wrecked Your Plans. How so? Can you elaborate? Before I forget, I recommend you guys go on cozy.tv at 8 p.m. Central Time. I think you guys should check that out. Just throwing that out there. Optional. Sonic Youth did really, really. That's funny. In 1,000 years, they're gonna dig up Madonna, and she's gonna be preserved from all the plastic and stuff. They're gonna think it was a form of mummification. Yeah, what are gonna be the relics of American pop culture? The no, nothing, nothing. You're gonna have a Thomas 777 tweets will be archived in the Congress archives. Yeah, Weird Al Yankovic. You need kind of that's also kind of like Primus level talent where the idea that you can just slip into any genre like that and mimic it and be true to its merits. That's the kind of thing. No, not politically provoked. You'll see it. You'll see it. The one with the most views, subject to change. Well, all right. Well, all right. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Just some loose thoughts. Loose thoughts. The betrayal of the boomer Gen X alliance at the expense of us. So, all right. All right. No, Vingal, man. Vingal knows how to get under my skin, how to misinterpret, how to this guy, man. Where's your hype man? Where's your subscribe to Vingal? Well, Manon, I gotta hear his side first. You know what I mean? Can't just listen to one side and chalk it up. I gotta hear both parties. So so anyways, we're gonna end this on a high note, okay? The boomers are out. Gen X is out. We are back, okay? We are supporting our people in pop culture. Perfect segue. Perfect segue. That's right. That's right, Vingle. I'll be your hype man. I'll be your hype man. Man, I don't know how to end on a higher note than that. That was I almost forgot. Forgot I had this here. So I'll have to pick up the Beatles cassette. Yo, so true. Yo, so true, Danny. Yo, so true, Danny. Hey, I'm thinking I'm thinking, among many things, I'm thinking we are so back and we are never coming down, frankly. You want to talk about things that are going to be archived in 1,000 years. The Zoomer legacy. The culture that resonates. So, all right. Paul, not in the know. Paul, you got to take the Wimpy Kid red pill. You got to take it, man. Many are saying this. But few are in the know. It's a very complicated thing. Man. All right. True. Subject to change. So true. All right. Thank you, Bell Curve. I appreciate that. No, Manone, that's not true. That is not true. We reject Harry Potter. That's not it, man. That's for women. That is the women's go-to novel. You got to resist the urge, man. Harry Potter fans are not going to make it. Sorry to say. Sorry. Yeah, Paul, that's got to be very confusing. I'd imagine. A late millennial. Yeah, cuz a bass guitarist was saying how SpongeBob is millennial. So, we could probably have some sort of an alliance there. So anyways. Maddie G. Yeah. Oh, late millennials. Yeah, true. We could probably make that a faction. An honorary Zoomer faction. Ah, anyways. Oh yeah, bell curve. I think you asked yesterday. I probably forgot. Yeah, I think I got exams next week. I'll have to verify, but we'll make it. You know why we're gonna make it? You know why we're gonna make it? Because we got it. Because we got it. So we're gonna make it. The boomers probably not gonna make it. Gen X has to have their legacy redefined. This generation deserves a better class of metal and we're gonna give it to them. So, all right, all right. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true, Richard. That's the thing. That's the thing. The good thing about decentralized media is a lot of that stuff can become relevant again if there's enough momentum taking it into the mainstream. And maybe, Paul, maybe you're onto something there. Maybe it was Dr. Seuss who caused this trajectory. Could be it. Winston Wolf, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, all right. I think I think we all right. All right. Oh, has there been a internet issue throughout the stream? I see something. Anyways, thank you guys for stopping by. And I'll be back sometime next week probably. Not sure on a topic, but I should get back into writing, especially with exams concluding. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I thank you guys. Okay, thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Appreciate the feedback. But I will see you guys relatively soon. So I appreciate it. Appreciate. And I'm sorry if it was a little too rambly. Try to fix that. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, thank you, Manon. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Richard. Poll, thank you, man. Subject to change. Bell curve. Vingle, of course. Stupendous. Thank you. Cool name. David the Gnome. The Gnome. Brotherhood of Nod. Smith. Thank you guys. Mike Floyd. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm sorry if I missed anybody. Thank you guys. And remember, if you guys want to contribute in the Discord, it's always available at your guys' convenience. And I would highly recommend you guys going on cozy.tv at 8 p.m. Central Time, just to check out some things. I was talking about that last night, and it seemed like nobody had any Twitter accounts, so it so I was trying to somehow get people on the same wavelength. But anyways, I'll be back relatively soon. Thank you guys for stopping by. Just Minone for what? Just check it out. Just check it out. Just check it out. I'll leave it at that. You guys will probably be interested. So thank you again, once again, for stopping by. And I'll see you guys soon. Have a great rest of your weekend.